call at 855-525-5683. So we're not live yet on YouTube, okay? Now, when I click go live, there you go. Now it's live on YouTube, okay? Now, and you all, excuse me, so the reason if you notice, it's different because I use, this piece of software to stream live on YouTube. You need a streaming piece of software, and I created that myself. Okay, this is a background I created. So I can advertise my products. If people want to advertise on this applet, I can actually sell these spots to people. Okay? All right. So we're having teaching Radio 101 right now, so y'all excuse me, all right? All right, so that's how we do that. So I stream all of that. I make all that, and I'll show you how I do all that as well. Are y'all familiar with Photoshop and stuff like that? Okay. Most of y'all should be. Y'all might be able to teach me a thing or three. But that's done in Photoshop. Okay? All right. So anyway, welcome to the show. We're in a teaching mode today, as we will be for the next 5 weeks as we have interns. So obviously, if you hear me talking to young people, we've got Clayton in today, along with Jemiah. They will be with us for the next 5 weeks. And I'm immersing them in radio, okay? From production, as we say, from the back of the house to the front of the house. I'm going to teach them everything that I know, and you never know, they might be able to teach me a few things as well. You all, as you know, this is one of the things that I enjoy doing when talking to and dealing with young people. Okay. Okay. So we got a lot of stuff to talk about today as well. Let me go ahead. One of the things that I always like to do is post the YouTube feed as well on Facebook. Now, once you all start setting this up, I'll be talking and you all will be making sure that all of this stuff gets posted. I'm going to teach all of y'all all of this, and I don't know what's going to happen once y'all leave, but anyway, but that's what you all will be doing, okay? So you'll be responsible for getting this set up, the Facebook feeds, as well as the YouTube feed, and then making sure that it gets posted to YouTube, to the Facebook feed. So one of the things that I do is I'll go here and just type in black, and typically Black Focus will come up. Radio right there, and just look for the new or today's date. Sometimes it can get confusing, but you see where it says live now. That's the YouTube feed. So I click on it and I copy this link, Control C, because I use a keyboard, and then I'll go. If I'm on my feed, I'll typically just post it on my main wall. Okay. Control V, and then here I need you to type, one of y'all to type today's Black Focus radio feed. Yeah. Okay. All right, so that's how we do it. Pretty soon I have them. I won't even have to tell them. All right. So now, make sure you want to make sure that you're grammatically correct. So today's, go capitalize the T. You just take the mouse and now backspace it out. There you go. All right. So that's what we'll do today. Capital T. Shift T. There you go. And then today's Black Focus radio feed. All right. And so every day one of you all will be doing one or the other. All right. All right. So we got a lot of stuff to talk about today. I hope you had a great weekend, and you can delete all that other stuff out. And then feed, and then after that from YouTube. Here, now hit delete. Keep going. Keep going. All right, you're good. From YouTube. Yeah. And tell you what, just to make it official, put today's date, 6/24/19. There we go. Now hit post. If I do, that one's for now. All right, boom. So we'll post the YouTube feed as well as the YouTube feed as well. The YouTube feed's a little easier, okay? But I just posted on, the Facebook feed's a little easier. I just posted on YouTube. And by the way, I want to remind people to make sure that you all go out and subscribe to my channel on YouTube. I was watching a YouTube feed yesterday, and that guy has 850,000 followers. Man! And he's trying to get 1 million. Because as you get 1,000 followers, as you go up, then you can really start making some money off of YouTube. So, hey, I want to make some money. So I need you all to go out to YouTube and subscribe to my channel. Have you all subscribed to my channel yet? Have y'all friended me on YouTube yet? Have y'all friended me on Facebook yet? So I'm giving y'all all this knowledge, and y'all ain't even friending me? What's up with that, Clayton? You don't be hiding over there, man.
I'm not hiding, man.
And what? So, and have y'all told somebody, hey, man, y'all need to listen to this guy every day. He crazy. But y'all need to be giving me some subscribers now. All right, so we're having some fun today with our interns, Jemiah and Clayton. They're going to be with us for the next 4 weeks, so I'm teaching them a lot about radio. And this is fun to do. I'm also sporting my 40th anniversary Little Rock Central High class reunion shirt. Let me turn around and let y'all see the back. Don't be upset because y'all ain't tigers, okay? Everybody can't be a tiger, okay? I'm just letting y'all know. It takes a special breed, a human being, to be a Little Rock Central Tiger. Yeah, I'm throwing shade to all y'all other high schools playing high school. That's how we do it. Had a fun weekend this weekend, of course. I will tell you that I had a fender bender. Nothing serious. I got like $1,000 deductible on my insurance, and I don't even think it's going to cost $1,000 to fix my car. Oh, so depressing. That's like the first accident I've had in like 20 years. I'm a little irritated today. Okay, so we got some great black facts for you, as well as we've got. Here's what I want you to do while you're sitting there, Jemiah. I need you to look up Abraham Lincoln's comments about slaves. Okay? All right. I'll explain that in just a moment. But we've got a lot of, or you can just say Abe Lincoln's quotes about slaves. Okay? So we've got a lot of stuff to talk about. I will tell you, if you read the tease, I'm going to take a friend and former teammate to task today. He is now a black preacher carrying the Republican water, okay? And I'm gonna tell you, I gotta take him to task, okay? So I'm gonna do it today. Hey, I still love him. I still think he's a great person, but he's just wrong, okay? So I'm going to do that today. That's what it's going to deal with today. Also, I got a great black fact for you. That I'm going to read as well. So I tell you what, let's go ahead and jump into our black facts because we want to make sure, and I'm kind of hesitating because I'm trying to get my bearings here. Okay, let's do it right now. And as you know, I've been on this reparations rant now for quite a long time, and it continues today. It's not going to stop. More and more silly comments came out over the weekend that I don't even dare to comment on. But I'm doing something particular because this black fact, to some extent, is going to buttress my argument against my friend. And let me go ahead and tell you his name, Iverson Jackson. Reverend, he's now Reverend Iverson Jackson. I met Reverend Iverson Jackson, who was then nothing more than a young man. When he was a freshman, I believe I was a sophomore at Southern Arkansas University. Iverson Jackson went to Little Rock Mills. We became very good friends and teammates. I've since moved away and come back, and Iverson Jackson is a pretty prominent preacher here in the Little Rock area, from what I understand. And what I always tell people is that if you're sitting in church and you are believing everything that comes out of your preacher's mouth, then you've got a problem. Let me say that again. If you are sitting in church, that's any church, and you believe everything that comes out of your preacher's mouth and you don't fact check him, then you've got a problem. Okay? Type in Juneteenth. Okay, wait a minute, it might be already there. So today I'm going to fact check. I'm going to fact check Iverson. Okay? It is important for us that if we are going to be in the media, and you know I've said it over and over again, it is important that we make sure that the media is giving out good information. We must understand that. And if we're going to lead our people, Control C. If we're going to lead our people, those of us who are in front, it is imperative that we're giving out good information. Control Z. Okay? It's imperative. Try it again. Control Z. You got to do it at the same time. All right, hit delete. Hit the delete key. Okay. All right, so type in Juneteenth again. So what we need to do today is I want to give you some background. And the reason I'm doing this is because it is important. It is important. That's what I'm looking for right there. All right. So today's Black Fact is going to deal with something horrific that the Republicans did. Okay? Now there's a place in Mississippi that grows the best peaches that many would argue in America. I mean, they say the peaches are so big that they weigh the limbs of the peach trees down. Unfortunately, people refuse to eat these peaches. People will not pick these peaches. I'll tell you why in a moment. The Devil's Punch Bowl, an American concentration camp so horrific, it was erased from history. Have you all ever heard of the Devil's Punch Bowl? Okay, great. Say the words concentration camps and most will surmise the topic surrounds World War II and the Nazis. But the hard labor, constant threat of death, and barbarism these microcosmic hells presented weren't unique to Adolf Hitler. In just 1 year, around 20,000 freed slaves perished in the Devil's Punch Bowl in Natchez, Mississippi. After the Civil War, a massive exodus of former slaves from southern plantations trekked northward in hopes of reaching a location of true freedom. But embittered soldiers, resentful the people considered property were now free, had other plans. One tiny town's population mushroomed 12-fold from the influx, as researcher Paula Westbrook, who has extensively studied the Devil's Punch Bowl, noted. When the slaves were released from the plantations during the occupation, they overran Natchez, and the population went from 10,000 to 120,000 overnight. Unable to grapple with the instant population swell, the city turned to Union troops, still lingering after the war, to devise a merciless, impenitent solution. So they decided to build an encampment form at Devil's Punch Bowl, which they walled off and wouldn't let them out. Former director of the Natchez City Cemetery, Don Estes, explained. Devil's Punch Bowl is so named for a cavernous bowl-shaped gulch walled off by treetop cliffs, an area unintentionally made perfect for a hellacious prison by nature herself. A tangle of lush green now tops bluffs near the Mississippi River in Natchez, holding past atrocities that took place when Union Army soldiers corralled, captured those freed slaves in worse conditions than they'd endured previously as slaves on sprawling plantations. In the unrelenting heat and humidity of the Deep South, African American men toiled at hard labor, clearing thickets of brush, while the women and children, not seen as a viable workforce for the task, languished without food or water behind a locked concrete wall of the concentration camp to die of starvation. Barbarous treatment didn't even end when someone died. The Union Army did not allow them to remove the bodies from the camp, Westbrook explained. They just gave them shovels and said, bury them where they drop. Bleak conditions of being cramped inside locked walls and forced to work until exhaustion or death also led to the spread of disease and illness, a little discussed but insidious issue for former slaves, killing up to 1 million individuals following ostensive emancipation. Let me read that again. A little discussed but insidious issue for former slaves, killing up to 1 million individuals following the ostensive emancipation. So what that's saying is that after the Emancipation Proclamation, over 1 million people were killed, ex-slaves. The disease broke out among them, smallpox being the main one, Estes said of the concentration camp prisoners, and thousands died and were begging to get out. Turn me loose, I'll go back to the plantation, anywhere but here. However, a dearth of information about these mostly post-bellum camps indeed leaves significant leeway for conjecture, and a smattering of conclusions say those detained preferred the slightly greater freedom compared to the brutality found on the plantations. Additional critics dispute Westbrook and Estes and the number who died in the Natchez camps, saying the number is likely to be close to just 1,000. But without methodical record keeping, the figure is impossible to verify with certainty. Either way, this black eye on American history is still one of the largest and the most brutal acts of state-sanctioned death this country has ever seen. As the Civil War drew to a close and during the nascent stages of emancipation, those who had been thrust into slavery and putatively freed held a precarious place outside the society of their enslavement. Thus, legitimately freed individuals and escapees alike were captured and held in contraband camps, so named because as commodities they were considered contraband by Union troops who had no qualms about perpetuating slavery for their own benefit. 3 such camps existed in the Devil's Punch Bowl area of Natchez. Historians' descriptions of the Devil's Punch Bowl have been loosely anecdotally backed by locals who describe human skeletons occasionally washing free from the location in times of heavy rain and flooding. Wild peace trees now dot the basin where human beings who believed they'd finally won freedom from slavery sweated through work for different captors until death granted them the ultimate reprieve. But Mississippians know better than to taste the bitter fruit fertilized with the blood of atrocity. Like so much about the history of the United States, sadistic acts perpetuated by officials acting on behalf of the government have been criminally downplayed to lessen the shame and facilitate collective memory loss. But there can be no doubt, whether unintentionally or by design, thousands succumbed to inhuman conditions at these camps under added duress of lacking the freedom so basic it's called the cornerstone of our nation. Whatever the truth of the Devil's Punch Bowl, it's a veritable guarantee no history book will be honest and thorough enough to shed light on this excruciating conditions akin to Nazi concentration camps, or even that forced slave labor continued while America readjusted its crooked and tarnished halo after the Civil War. And that's my black fact of the day.
Tune to Black Focus Radio for more dynamic Black facts, our culture, our history, our people on JoyNetRadio.com.
And if you would like to sponsor Dynamic Black Facts, call me up at 615-554-0568, and I'll hook you up with a great advertising package. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. Now, why am I talking about the Devil's Punch Bowl? Because the Devil's Punch Bowl, as I said when I started this piece, this monologue, is that there was a place in America where the peaches grew so big and so large, but no one would eat them. That place is Natchez, Mississippi. That place is the Devil's Punch Bowl, where the peach trees, as you heard me read in that piece, line the grove. And I've read stories where the locals will not touch those peaches. They rot off the tree every year because the locals know that those peaches are being fertilized by the bodies of dead men and women, dead ex-slaves, some of your ancestors who were fleeing the South, but they were caught up in another form of slavery by Union soldiers. Now, that's important to note. Weren't Union soldiers supposed to be fighting to free the slaves? And would you argue, at least I would, caller, hang on a minute, I'll be with you in a moment. Would you argue that at the Devil's Punch Bowl, that those Union soldiers, many of them were of the party of Lincoln? Wouldn't you argue that? I would say probably so. So you would tend to believe that they were Republicans, right? You all know where I'm going with this yet? Because I'm about to debunk a good friend of mine, okay? And I don't mean to call him out, but this ignorance has to stop. And if we cannot speak on the facts and agree on the facts, then we are doomed as a nation. Because we know America has tried to hide some of the brutal things that they did to black people. I'm just looking at an article here, another article, and if you click on that article about the Devil's Punch Bowl that I just read, there's a link in there how the end of slavery led to starvation and death for millions of black people. So after slavery, after the Emancipation Proclamation, millions of black people died from starvation. I'm just curious. Who was in power at the time? Was it the Republican Party? Was it the party of Lincoln? You're going to get my point here in just a moment. And Iverson Jackson, Reverend Iverson Jackson, I hope you're listening. And if any of you out there knows Reverend Iverson Jackson, please tell him to listen. Okay? And he's more than welcome. He's been in this studio before. He's more than welcome to come in and debate these facts. But at the end of slavery, during the Emancipation Proclamation, now we know at this time Abraham Lincoln is dead. The Republican Party takes over. The Freedmen's Bureau is set up. What happens? Here's Abraham Lincoln. You know, I dislike slavery. I confess, I hate to see the poor creatures hunted down and called and carried back to their stripes and unrewarded toils, but I bite my lip and keep quiet. You may remember, as I well do, that there were on board 10 or a dozen slaves shackled together with irons. The sight was a continual torment to me, and I see it something like every time I touch the Ohio and any other slave border. You ought to appreciate how much the great body of the northern people do crucify their feelings in order to maintain their loyalty to the Constitution and the Union. I do oppose the extension of slavery because my judgment and feelings so prompt me. The slave breeders and slave traders are a small, odious, and detested class among you. That's Abraham Lincoln. And we can go through quote after quote after quote as it relates to Abraham Lincoln. Okay? But there are some other things about Abraham Lincoln, that Abraham Lincoln, he wasn't an abolitionist. Okay? Abraham Lincoln didn't believe blacks should have the same rights as whites. Remember the Lincoln-Douglas debates? Let me just read this to you. Though Lincoln argued that the founding fathers' phrase, all men are created equal, applied to blacks and whites alike, this did not mean he thought they should have the same social and political rights. His views became clear during the 1958 series of debates with his opponent in the Illinois race for U.S. Senate, Stephen Douglas, who accused him of supporting Negro equality. In their fourth debate at Charleston, Illinois, on September 18, 1958, Lincoln made his position clear. I will say then that I am not, nor ever have been, in favor of bringing about in any way the social and political equality of white and black races, he began, going on to say that he opposed blacks having the right to vote, to serve on juries, to hold office, and to intermarry with whites. What he did believe was that, like all men, blacks had the right to improve their condition in society and to enjoy the fruits of their labor. In this way, they were equal to white men, and for this reason, slavery was inherently unjust. I want to read one other thing to you, and then I'm going to explain why I'm calling Reverend Iverson Jackson out. We just celebrated Juneteenth. Okay? Juneteenth is June 19th. Juneteenth occurred 2.5 years after the Emancipation Proclamation was issued in 1863. Now, the reason I'm reading this is because I read this very thing to you on last Thursday, or Thursday and Friday, as a matter of fact, because I wanted you to know what Juneteenth was all about. I wanted you to understand the importance of Juneteenth. Every person that is black ought to be celebrating Juneteenth. You celebrate the 4th of July. In fact, many of you all have your family reunions on the 4th of July, not understanding that your people were not free July 4th, 1776. Your people were in shackles. Your people were slaves. The women and children were being raped. The men were being buck broken. Your people were not free. And it wasn't until January 1st of 1863, when the Emancipation Proclamation was issued, that it became clear that slavery truly, in that form, was over. Juneteenth is the oldest nationally celebrated commemoration of ending slavery in the United States. Dating back to 1865, it was on June 19th that Union soldiers, led by Major General Gordon Granger, landed at Galveston, Texas, with the news that the war had ended and that the enslaved were now free. Note that this was 2.5 years after, not 3 months, Iverson Jackson. President Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation, which had become official January 1st, 1863. The Emancipation Proclamation had little impact on the Texans due to the minimal number of Union troops to enforce the new executive order. However, with the surrender of General Lee on April 1865 and the arrival of General Granger's regiment, the forces were finally strong enough to influence and overcome the resistance. And I continue. One more paragraph. Later attempts to explain the 2.5-year delay in the receipt of the important news have yielded several versions that have been handed down through the years. Often told is the story of a messenger who was murdered on his way to Texas with the news of freedom. Another is that the news was deliberately withheld by the enslavers to maintain the labor force on the plantations. And still one other is that federal troops actually waited for the slavers to reap the benefits of one last cotton harvest before going to Texas to enforce the Emancipation Proclamation. So, here's why I'm talking about this today. And Reverend Jackson, I respect you. I appreciate you. I am a friend of yours. We went to college together. We crabbed up and down the field together, and tobacco spit, sweated together. We fought together. We won together. But my brother, you are wrong. This is nothing personal. But again, if we are going to be leaders of a people, then we must be willing to bow to the truth. Because if we're not willing to bow to the truth, then no matter what title that you may have, you are leading your people down a path to hell. So here's why I'm a little upset with my friend Reverend Jackson. So yesterday, a video came across my feed, and he was having an interview with some white lady. And apparently this video was put together prior to Juneteenth. Okay? And clearly this was a Republican woman who was interviewing Iverson Jackson. Now, if he wants to be a Republican, which apparently he is, and I'm going to address that here in a moment, that's his business. But when you're giving out information, historical information that is clearly just a click away, then you got to tell the truth, my brother. You got to know the facts. If you're going to lead our people, then if you're not willing to echo facts, then you're no better than Satan, who would lie to you. Hello? So here's one of the things that he said yesterday. When she asked him about Juneteenth, he began to explain that that was when slaves became truly free. He mentioned the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863. But he said it was 3 months after the Emancipation Proclamation was issued was when people in Texas, Galveston, Texas, now he didn't even say Galveston, got word that slaves were free. 3 months, when in fact the time frame was 2.5 years. Hello? Now you're probably saying, well, maybe he misspoke. You know, I thought about that for a moment, but then when he threw in the fact that it was Lincoln, because he was proud of the fact that it was Abraham Lincoln who issued the Emancipation Proclamation, it was pretty clear to me that he was trying to echo Republican talking points. A black man echoing Republican talking points. Now, you have the right to be any political persuasion that you want to be. I happen to be an independent. I'm not a Democrat because I don't trust them, and I'm not a Republican because I don't trust them. I'm just being real with you. But when you start echoing their talking points, you will always fail, because the majority of their talking points are based on lies. Your commander-in-chief, I call him PLOTUS, the pathological liar of the United States, because all he does is what? Lie. So if your leader is a liar, when you begin to echo his talking points, he makes a fool out of you because you become a liar. So that's point one, is that if you're going to lead people, then you need to make sure that the facts that you are espousing are in fact facts. Okay? It wasn't 3 months that the people in Galveston, Texas got the word that they were free. It was almost 3 years. You should know that, my brother. If you're going to have a Juneteenth celebration at your church, then you ought to know what Juneteenth is all about. And that's for any of you out there. If you're going to have a Juneteenth celebration, then you ought to know why you're celebrating Juneteenth. Because what that says to me is that you're fronting. You weren't really celebrating Juneteenth. You were pretending to celebrate to make yourself look good to your black constituents, although you're a Republican. That's number one, okay? Because that's an important fact here. 3 months as opposed to almost 3 years, that's a significant time difference. And you ought to know that. Number two, The other talking point that Republicans like to use when they're trying to recruit black people, that's right, Jackie, lead them honestly and truthfully. See, here's the point. This is why this is so important. If you tell the truth, then and they still don't want to follow you, then that's on them. But at least you are telling the truth. But when you deceive and people figure out that you are deceiving them, then you got a mess on your hand. Now, I don't know if you intentionally tried to deceive people. I don't know if you were trying not to delve into the facts because you were on some type of Republican medium. But brother, if you're afraid to be a black man in front of Republicans, then you're not really a man at all. I'm just going to be honest with you. I'm just going to be real with you. So here's the other Republican talking point that they always like to use. Well, you know, it was Lincoln that freed the slaves, and Lincoln was a Republican. All right, y'all heard the quote I read about Lincoln, right? Lincoln didn't give a damn about black people. Lincoln didn't even think that black people were equal. Lincoln only freed the slaves because he had no choice, because the North was losing the war. If you knew history, then you would know that. And if in fact that you knew that, then you wouldn't be walking around bragging on the fact that Lincoln freed the slaves, because his intent was not honesty at all. His intent was not care for slaves at all. His intent was simply financial. He didn't care about slaves. So when you're using Republican talking points and you say Lincoln freed the slaves, yeah, he signed the bill, the Emancipation Proclamation, but what was his intent? His intent was, I don't really give a damn about black folks. In fact, Lincoln had slaves himself. In fact, all of those presidents during that time had slaves. What was his intent? So when you try to use the talking point where Lincoln freed the slaves, you know, that argument holds no water. You say Lincoln freed the slaves and he was a Republican. That argument holds no water, because it was Union troops who were Republicans, most of them, who kept the word from Galveston, Texas. It was Union troops who didn't go into Galveston, Texas. It took them 2.5 years to go into Galveston, Texas, to tell those slaves that they were free. They were Republicans. By the way, you heard there was a reason behind me reading the piece about the Devil's Punch Bowl. You see, the Devil's Punch Bowl was set up by Union troops. Y'all heard me read that, right? Union troops who were Republican. By this time, Abraham Lincoln was assassinated, and Republicans took over, and they decided that they were going to give back all of the gains that Union troops had earned to the South. These were Republicans. Where is the love for Republicans now? Tell me what the Republicans did. Well, I just told you over 1 million ex-slaves were murdered, starved to death from the time that the Emancipation Proclamation was signed until they were able to get out of the South under Republican rule. Come on, Republicans, talk to me. Come on, you black folks who want to holler about Lincoln freed the slaves. Where are you? What's your talking point? Because the fact of the matter is, Republicans or Democrats did not give a damn about slaves and black people upon freedom. Hello? Oh, you say I'm kidding? Well, since Republicans want to blame Democrats for what happened in the 60s, where were you under the black codes? How many Republican senators, when they signed the 13th Amendment, by the way, hand me that bag, please. I want to read this 13th Amendment to you again. Because, as I said, if you don't know history, you'll espouse all kinds of ignorance. And I'm hoping that you all will point Reverend Jackson to this piece today. Former teammate, former mule rider. But brother, you wrong. And I got to call you out. Because this ignorance is what's hurting our people. If you're going to lead, lead. But I want to read the 13th Amendment to you. Because I want to know how many Republican senators and representatives signed this amendment. Okay? Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude except as a punishment for crime whereof the party shall be duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. So in other words, the 13th Amendment freed the slaves, but it didn't free the slaves because soon afterwards, they began to pass loitering and vagrancy laws that did nothing more than lock black men back up and force them back into free slavery. That's what the 13th Amendment did, Reverend Iverson Jackson. How many Republicans signed off on that? And how many years has that particular amendment been in effect? How many years have Republicans signed off and said that amendment works for the American people? Since you got your nose so far up the Republicans' butts. We talking facts here. And by the way, Reverend Jackson, you're more than welcome to come on the show to debate these facts. In fact, you're welcome to come on the show to debate your love for the Republican Party, because I'm not done with the Republican Party. It's nothing personal. But this is to all the black people out there that's running and carrying water for the Republican Party. I felt like this was, something was on my heart. It's kind of like when preachers say, they get up on Sunday morning and they say, well, the Lord touched me. I was going to preach something else, but the Lord touched me to go to this scripture. Well, you know what? I don't know who touched me this morning, but somebody touched me and said, I need to talk about the Constitution today because I'm tired of the ignorance. 855-525-5683 is the number. Call me up. I want to hear. If you are a black Republican, I want to hear. Because this argument that the Republican freed the slave, and that's why you are a Republican, is pure foolishness. Now, I'm not telling you to become a Democrat. If I had my choice, I'd tell you to become an independent. Because once you become independent, you begin to think with your mind and not with your party. So I just read the 13th Amendment to you. How many Republican senators voted for that? By the way, during the black codes, the black codes. Oh, before we even get to the black codes, let me talk about the Freedmen's Bureau. How many Republicans raided the Freedmen's Bureau? Y'all know what the Freedmen's Bureau is, don't you? The Freedmen's Bureau was supposed to be a banking/clearinghouse for ex-slaves. It was the Republican Party who promised 40 acres and a mule. Where is that Republican Party now when we're talking about reparations today? Because we never got those 40 acres and a mule, Republican Party. So if you want to tout and cheese about the fact that that Abraham Lincoln was a Republican and Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves through the Emancipation Proclamation, then certainly you have to own up to the fact that the Republican Party failed the black community and ex-slaves through the Freedmen's Bureau. Because all of that money that was set aside to go to ex-slaves to help make their transition from slavery to freedom better was pilfered by Republicans. Hello? Hello? Where's that Republican Party now? Where's that 40 acres and a mule that the Republican Party promised to black slaves? But you know what? That's okay, because Lincoln freed the slaves. It's kind of like being on a boat in the middle of an ocean. And you're captive on this boat. You're in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. And this is certainly apropos considering the fact that the Atlantic slave trade was part of the Atlantic Ocean. And quite often when these slavers were caught, they would throw slaves overboard. And those slaves would be eaten by sharks. It was said, if you read some of the ex-slave manuals, it was said that sharks followed these ships from the west coast of Africa to the east coast of the Americas because they knew at some point they might get a free meal. Where was the Republican Party then, and where is it now? I'm just asking. Because, once we did the Emancipation Proclamation, by the way, where was the Republican Party before the Emancipation Proclamation? Many of you were benefiting from slavery. We've already talked about the stories of Harvard and many of the Ivy League schools who knew that they were educating the children of slavers, but because they were being paid big dollars, that they turned a blind eye. We just had a young man last week, Kyle Cusham, who because of his racial epithets on his Facebook page, Harvard decided that they were not going to allow him, they were going to take his scholarship that they awarded him because they understood that they didn't want a racist on their campus. They were trying to make amends for what they did in the 60s. So we know Republicans benefited from slavery as well. But I digress. Let's move past the Freedmen's Bureau. Let's talk about the black codes. Let's talk about the black codes. You all know the black codes, right? Those were the unwritten rules that white people initiated to keep black people from further assimilating into American society. The one where you couldn't vote unless your grandfather voted. So if I were an emancipated slave, that's where we get grandfather clauses. If I were an emancipated slave, and I'm going to the polls to vote, and you say, well, you can vote if you can prove to me that your grandfather voted. Now, how am I going to vote if I'm an emancipated slave knowing that my grandfather never voted? I'm not. Or if I can tell you how many marbles are in this jar sitting on this counter, I can vote. Well, how am I going to tell you how many marbles are sitting in that jar sitting on the counter if in fact I can't count? And the reason I can't count is because you didn't educate me as a slave. Or you can vote if you can read this scripture. Well, Mr. White Man, I know I learned about the white Jesus when I was a slave, but I can't read that scripture because you never taught me how to read. Really? So where were you, Mr. Republican? Where were you, Mr. Republican? All of you who want to talk, all of you black folks out there who want to tout about how great the Republican Party was and what they did for black people, where were you then, Republican Party, under the black codes? I'm not done with you because I told you today I'm going to set some things straight. Now, if you don't believe what I'm saying, all you got to do is go back and do some fact checking. I don't mind you fact checking my stuff because I'm not going to lead you astray. I'm not going to lie to you for a political gain. 855-525-5555. 855-5683 is the number. That's how you get in touch with me. When we come back, I got more about Republican lies and why black people are telling them. 855-525-5683 is the number. It's Black Focus Radio, and I ain't playing. Right here on joynetradio.com. It ain't personal. It's just the facts, ma'am. Just the facts. All right, so at the top of the hour, I usually start at 12:58. Any show you're doing, you want to start their theme music 2 minutes before the show ends. That lets them know that, hey, I got 2 minutes to shut up. Okay? So now what I'll do, whereas that we automated the show by itself in the first hour, we can turn the automation back on if we wanted to and do that again if we wanted. But I'm just going to leave the automation off. And I know that I'm going to do a stop set. Remember, stop set, drop, disclaimer, and open. Okay? So I'm going to go here to stop sets, and I'm going to pick one. Try to remember in your head the ones you played previously. That way you'll know you won't play the same one over again. Okay? So as soon as I hit this, boom, see it plays. All right? So now I know I'm playing a stop set. I know I got to do a drop coming up. And I know I got to do the disclaimer and the open. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and go over here to drops. I can play them here, but those drops are not that long. Now, see that drop here is only 2 seconds. So when I hit that drop, I got 2 seconds to jump in here to Dynamic Dave stuff to do the disclaimer. Or what I can do is go in here to my media file and find a drop. So I'll just type in, what would I type in here? Drop. Okay. So there's a top drop. Okay. I'm going to drag that drop down here. Okay. So now I'm going to go back to my quick keys. I'm in my folder. So what I can do to save me some time so the transition will sound better, I can hit this top drop here, and as soon as it finishes, I can pop right up here. Otherwise, I would have had to do this. I would have had to find it. So I'm in there, then I got to find it. You see how cumbersome that is? So you figure out ways to make, the whole point is you want the transitions to sound smooth. Okay? Okay, so what I need you to do next, I want you to look up, do a Google search for the number of Republican presidents.
Mitchell Funeral Home welcomes all of Arkadelphia and Arkansas in Clark County since 1966. At Mitchell Funeral Home, they understand that the funeral is a celebration of life and legacy, so the entire staff takes great pride in the caring, personal, and professional services they provide. Cremations, funeral planning, burial policy, life insurance, notary, and monument sales are just a few of the services they offer. Flexible packages are available as well. Mitchell Funeral Home appreciates the trust and confidence placed in them. And
okay, good. They did them in the order as they were.
So
okay,
as to serve you better. Call now. Get connected. 870-246-2611. That's 870-246-2611. Call, click, or come by. MitchellFuneralServices.com. Don't wait till we're needed. Call us now. Let's walk through this together.
Okay. How many Republican presidents owned slaves?
And service you can depend on at Mitchell Funeral Home.
Okay, top drop. See how smooth that went?
Black Focus Radio.
So you want it, bam, bam.
Of the station, its management, or its advertisers. Now, let's get ready to focus on our issues, our solutions, using our voices on Black Focus Radio.
Welcome to Black Focus, the show designed with our community in mind, where we focus on our issues, developing our solutions, using our voices. Central Arkansas, surrounding areas, and the nation. Get ready. Black Focus starts right now. Phone lines open at 855-525-5683. So here's your host, David W. Coleman and Robert Webb.
All right, welcome back to the second hour of the show. I decided today, because I heard just some bad information from a friend of mine who's a black minister in this city. And if he's any indication of what's going on with black ministers in Little Rock, I now understand why Little Rock is in the doldrums that it exists. And unfortunately, my brothers and sisters, it's going to be up to many of you to question those who think that they know. Let me be clear with you. Just because someone is a minister, you can question them. And the fact that if your minister does not allow you to question him, then he should not be your minister. And then if he's one of those ministers who have bought the church, then you ought to leave that church. Okay? Because last I checked, nobody knows everything. And based on some of the stuff that these black ministers are preaching every Sunday, they don't know jack, dog. And they are afraid to expand their minds to learn more. But this is about a friend of mine who I went to college with, who I played on the same football with, who is now a minister in this city and a Republican. He is the, what did they call him? He's the Republican chairperson for black recruitment for the Republican Party. It's something like that. So in other words, he's responsible for recruiting black folks into the Republican Party. That's almost recruiting people to ride the Titanic. Because the other day, and by the way, I did post on this feed that he was having this live, that he was wrong and he needed to check his facts. So I'm not just doing this blindly on my show. I did post on his feed the very thing that I'm saying today. Not everything, because obviously I'm on a talk show. So basically I posted on his feed that he was wrong. So we were talking about the Republicans, and I was kind of giving you a historical synopsis of the Republican Party, because Republicans like to say that Lincoln freed the slaves, when in fact Lincoln was a racist. He didn't like slaves. He didn't care about slaves. Okay? He only did it for a political decision, not because he was concerned about black people. And then I brought you forward that after the death of Lincoln, I wanted to know where the Republican Party was after that. So we talked a little bit about the Freedmen's Bureau that was supposed to be set up by Republicans. Okay? And how it was plundered and the Republican Party did nothing. We talked about the Devil's Punch Bowl in Natchez, Mississippi, where Union soldiers who were thought to be of the Republican persuasion allowed hundreds of thousands of black men and women to starve to death. But they were Republicans. We talked about the soldiers who refused to go into Texas for fear for 2.5 years, because to let those people know that they had been freed by the Emancipation Proclamation. Thus, we get the commemoration of Juneteenth every June 19th. It was 2.5 years, Reverend Jackson, not 3 months. So I'm curious, did you misspeak? Or were you trying to soften the blow for white people and what they did in slavery, because that's what y'all do. You know, you Republican black folks, you have to have talking points, and you got to make sure that you don't offend any of your white constituents or those white people who are paying your salary. Because I asked you the question on that feed as well. Are you being paid by the Republican Party or the Southern Baptist Convention? Because if they are cutting you a check, then you really have no credibility, my brother. You've sold your soul to the devil. And once they get tired of you, they're going to cut you. They're going to cut you like snot out of your nose. Now, let me continue, because we were at the black codes. Where were the Republican Party? And while in the break, I had my intern to look up a couple of things. One of the things that I wanted to look up, the Republican Party. So let's see, there have been 19 Republican presidents since Abraham Lincoln first ran as a Republican to win the presidency in 1861. So just like I just did this, you see how I just looked up some facts, Reverend Jackson? You could have looked up some facts about Juneteenth as opposed to being on a white media and espousing lies about Juneteenth. You had your phone. You could have done just like I'm doing. Here's what I'm going to tell all of you out there. One of the things that I tell young people, that when they just because someone, when I would talk to young people, particularly the young black athletes, and you know, the media, one of the things, what you all don't know, is the media will stick a microphone in your face so you can make a statement, not to hear what you say, but to listen, hear how you sound. And you know what they do behind closed doors? They make fun of how you speak. I've been in this business for 35 years, brothers and sisters. I just revealed something to you. Not all, but a lot of them do. They laugh when you add a lot of you-knows. Or they laugh when you can't pronounce a word. Or they laugh when you bounce an adverb across the wall. They laugh when you don't have proper subject-verb agreement. So I tell people all the time that just because someone sticks a microphone in your mouth, that doesn't mean you have to comment. And if you know you're going to comment, make sure that you have your facts. And if you think that you're going to forget your facts, it doesn't hurt to get you some little cards, some index cards, and write down what you want to say, because so you won't sound like a fool when you say what you say. And what you said the other day, Reverend Iverson Jackson, you sounded like a fool. No offense. Don't take this personal. This is public speaking 101. Okay? You could have fact-checked that yourself. Or if you had the right people, your secretary or whomever was with you, they should have fact-checked that information. So that's why I'm here. So 19 Republican presidents since Abraham Lincoln. Let me go through and read some of these names, because you always want to talk about your Republican president, Abraham Lincoln. You always want to talk about how they freed the slaves, and you always want to pat yourselves on the back as Republicans. But let me ask you, after Abraham Lincoln, what did Ulysses S. Grant do? He was a Republican. What did he do for black people? In fact, during his time, 1869 to 1873, Ulysses S. Grant oversaw the reconstruction of the South following the Civil War and the passage of the 15th Amendment, ensuring the right to vote to all citizens of all races. But under his administration, the Freedmen's Bureau was in fact established and plundered. And the South basically was awarded, or I should say, Southern plantation owners was awarded $300 per slave with the money that was supposed to go to ex-slaves. That's a Republican. So if you're going to claim Abraham Lincoln, don't you have to claim Ulysses S. Grant? What about Rutherford B. Hayes? Rutherford B. Hayes, he was a one-term president and is often associated with the end of Reconstruction. In fact, many believe that his agreement to pull federal troops from the South, effectively ending Reconstruction, led to his victory for president. So in other words, he basically sold out the ex-slaves so he could be president. And none of the efforts for Reconstruction ever took place. He was a Republican too. Hello? Y'all never talk about these guys. You always talk about Lincoln freed the slaves, but here are two presidents who did nothing for ex-slaves once they were free. And I would argue that their policies that they put in place did more to damage ex-slaves and left black people in the conditions that they are today. Here's another one. James Garfield. Now, he couldn't do much because he was killed in office. Here's Chester A. Arthur. He was President Garfield vice president. What did he do for black people? He was a Republican. Here's Benjamin Harrison. What about him? I mean, in this little synopsis, I can tell that nothing was specifically credited to any of these presidents after Lincoln for black people, and they were Republican. What about William McKinley? What about Teddy Roosevelt? You know, Teddy Roosevelt was he walked softly and carried the big stick. He wanted to fight graft. What's going on in Washington today? What did Teddy do for black people? William Taft. Warren G. Harding. What did he do? Calvin Coolidge. Herbert Hoover. Dwight Eisenhower. Richard Nixon. Gerald Ford. Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush. And don't forget W. Bush. So I just read 19 presidents. Republican presidents. See, the point I want to make to my friend Alverson Jackson is this, is that everything evolves. And whether or not it evolves into something beautiful or tragic, everything evolves. And although the Republican Party, if you want to give them credit for the Emancipation Proclamation, I will do that. Instead of the Republican Party evolving, they devolved. Now, all while the Republican Party was claiming that they were for black people from Abraham Lincoln to today, the Democratic Party was the Dixiecrats. They were actually perpetuating slavery. They were actually perpetuating the black codes. They were actually perpetuating Jim Crow. It wasn't until the late 60s when Richard Nixon ran for office that they decided that they were going to pit the poor whites against the poor blacks. That was the Lee Atwater strategy. Reverend Jackson, you can go out and research this. You know, Lee Atwater, before he died of brain cancer, he apologized because he realized that the policies that he had put in place has done more to divide this country than any other policy. Now, by the way, Lee Atwater was a Republican. So it was Lee Atwater who decided that he was going to flip the Republican Party. that the Republican Party now had to go after those Democrats who didn't believe in the Democratic Party anymore because the Democratic Party was fighting for voting rights. So they had to flip the party. So instead of the Democratic Party being the party of racism and bigotry, which is their history, the Republican Party decided to take on that mantle. This is for you, Reverend. I'm giving this history lesson for Reverend Iverson Jackson and any of you black Republicans out there who want to carry Republican water and you want to stand on the throne of Abraham Lincoln freeing the slaves that he didn't give a damn about. And you all want to stand on how great the Republican Party has been for black people. You cannot point to one point in history since Abraham Lincoln where the Republican Party was standing with and for black people. I will wait. Now, you know I'm a history buff, right? I cannot point to anywhere, even in the Great Depression. Even Franklin Roosevelt did very little for black people in the Great Depression. I want to know. In fact, I want to know anywhere in history to this point where a political party, Democrat or Republican, when they were in office, put together specific legislation that would, not symbolic legislation, but specific legislation that would benefit black people. I want to know. Talk to me, brothers and sisters. Because history will show us that there is none, whether it be Republican-led or Democratic-led. So what I want to know, my brothers and sisters, is why are you following any of these parties? Why isn't, in fact, that a black minister who has a bully pulpit every Sunday, who can color the thoughts of his congregation, would be allowing his congregation to support any party, let alone a Republican Party? A Republican Party that has clearly told us that it hates people of color. So here we are. Where are we now? We've done Jim Crow. We're now in the 60s. Where was the Republican Party with the Watts riots? Where was the Republican Party when all of those people were being hung? Where were you? Where was the Republican Party when there had to be federal troops at my beloved high school, Little Rock Central? Where were you? Where was the Republican Party for black people down through the history of the Republican Party? Because again, you all want to say Lincoln freed the slaves. But what was his motivation? And after Lincoln freed the slaves, what did the Republican Party do? Because your Republican talking point that Lincoln freed the slave, that's not a good talking point. Because if that's the only point in history that you can point to where the Republican Party has done anything for black people, well, that's a piss poor record. That's a piss poor record. Democrats are no better. Don't get me wrong. I'm not sitting up here arguing for the Democratic Party either. They are no better. See, what has happened to the Republican Party now? Because the Republican Party realized that our values, because their values are about trickle-down economics and economic philosophy that has been debunked by economist after economist. You all know what the trickle-down economic policy is of Republicans, right? Let's give all the money to the rich folks. And then the rich folks will spend that money and it'll trickle down to you poor folks. Well, we have prima facie evidence today that that philosophy doesn't work. What is that evidence? Well, the Trump tax cut. We just saw it. We're 2.5 years into the Trump tax cut, and guess what? Those trillions of dollars that they gave to those billionaires and millionaires, none of that money, and you can go right now and Google it, Mr. Republican Party, Iverson Jackson. You can go and Google it right now, and economist after economist has said that that trickle-down economic theory has not worked, and it has never worked. But you know what Republicans would say? Oh, well, those polls, those economists, they're not our economists. You know what? That's almost saying 1 and 1 plus 1 is 2. But because a Republican didn't say it, you don't believe it. See how ignorant that sounds? So why are you leading your people to a party that doesn't care about them? There is nothing the Republican Party wants to do except feed its fat cat lobbyist. So I guess you, like many other black people, have decided, hey, I want some of that money, so I'll say anything to get some of that money. It's even more disturbing because you're a minister. Because if you tell me that the Bible is true, yet you espouse lies from a political party, what does that say about you? Hello? I ain't trying to get personal. We're trying to have a conversation here. If you are a black person, if you are a black minister, and you are carrying Republican water, and you're saying that the Bible is true, the word of God for the people of God, and it's true, how the hell are you a Republican? I remember the Sermon on the Mount. I'm not trying to preach to you today, but I remember that, what was it, 6 fish and 6 barley loaves? And there was a multitude of people. Jesus didn't say, hey, we're going to have to shut this down. It's too many of y'all out there. I'm tired. I'm hungry. I'm sweating. I need something to drink. I got the NBA finals are starting later on this evening. I got to get there. No, Jesus didn't say that. Jesus said, hey, we're going to feed all these people. If you tell me that's true. I remember Jesus going to a wedding and they ran out of wine. And Jesus didn't want the party to flop. And what did Jesus do? He turned that wine into water. Yeah, he saved the party. I remember the woman with the issue of blood. You see, many of your Republican friends would rather her die than to have touched the hem of his garment. Come on, somebody. I remember the man that they had to take the roof off the house and lower him down so he couldn't walk, so he could be blessed by Jesus. Come on now. If Jesus was a Republican, then that man would have died. So if you tell me that all of that is true about Jesus, then how the hell are you a Republican? How are you telling me that as a Republican Party that you can condone locking children up in cages with no food, with no soap, with no water, with no toothbrush? How can you condone separating children from their families? How are you Republican, Reverend? In fact, how are any of you black people Republicans? Oh, wait a minute. You're saying, well, we got to stop these immigrants from coming into America because they're going to take our jobs. Well, wait a minute. How many immigrant jobs have been taken from you black people? Come on now, talk to me. I ain't trying to make you mad. I ain't getting personal. I'm just trying to, see, I like to ask questions that require real answers. How many jobs has been taken from black folks by immigrants? Oh, you say building jobs? Well, some of y'all didn't want to take those jobs anyway because it was too hot. Lawn care, some of y'all didn't want to take those jobs anyway because that was beneath you. Not understanding that regardless, look, if I earn $100,000 cutting yards as opposed to you earning $100,000 sitting in an office, last I checked, $100,000 is $100,000. Hello? But some of y'all wouldn't take those jobs, and now y'all want to claim that you upset because the immigrants are coming here. Well, wait a minute. Why are you upset? Because the country that says immigrants don't belong here was the same country that brought your ancestors here as slaves. Hello? I know you're mad, but I have to talk about this today because many black leaders in this city are leading our people to hell. They're leading them to hell. And many of you all are following them because you don't have sense enough to ask a question. Or maybe you're afraid to ask a question. Look, the reason I give my phone number to this show every day, 855-525-5683, is because I want you to call me. I want you to test me. I want you to say, hey, Brother Dave, what you said about this is wrong. And then you know what I'm going to do? I'm either going to have one of my interns to look it up, or I'm going to sit right here while you're on the phone and I'm going to look it up. Because I want to be right about history. Because, see, if we don't learn about history, we're doomed to repeat it. Part of the reason that we're in the predicament that we are in as black people is that we have not learned our history. We don't know that our history is their history. They don't know that their history came from our history. They don't know that this country is based on Grecian philosophy. And where did the Greeks go to learn about laws? They went to Africa, to sub-Saharan Africa. There's a reason why there's a city named Alexandria, named after Alexander the Great. But what you don't understand is that Alexander the Great wanted to push further into southern Africa, and he was repelled by an army of female black soldiers called the Dahomey warriors. Black women with spears repelled Alexander the Great's army. Hello? But you don't know that. So, Reverend Jackson, if you listen to this piece, you're more than welcome to call the show. You're more than welcome to come to the show, and let's talk. I'd like to understand the philosophy of black people and the Republican Party. In fact, I'm trying to understand the philosophy of black people and any political party. If you know nothing else about me, I am a student of history. Because I wanted to know, how could a people be so evil to another people? I don't have the answer to that yet, and I've been researching it now for quite some time. One other note I want to talk about presidents. George Washington owned slaves, 317. Thomas Jefferson owned slaves, 600 plus. James Madison owned slaves, 100 plus. Andrew Jackson owned slaves and brutally murdered thousands and thousands of Native Americans he owned 200. James Monroe, 75. Martin Van Buren only owned one that we know of. Zachary Taylor, 150. James Polk, 25. John Tyler, 70. William Henry Harrison, 11. Andrew Johnson, 8. And Ulysses Grant, 1. Now, wait a minute. How is a Ulysses Grant owning slaves when it was Ulysses S. Grant who fought to free the slaves? And that's right, Ulysses Grant was a Republican. So the next time, if you're listening to me, Republicans, the next time you fix your mouth to say Lincoln freed the slaves, I want to know what the other Republican presidents did. Otherwise, stop using that useless and ridiculous talking point. Because that's what it is. If you know history, you know that it is useless and ridiculous. Yeah, I'm laughing at y'all. I'm laughing at your ignorance. And you call yourself a leader? Really? All right, I got you. I got you, dog. Where exactly are you leading your people? Because if you're not using truth, you're leading them to hell. I gotta take a break. I'm sorry to laugh in your face. Don't let facts get in the way of a good story though, bro. I got you. Back in a moment. It's Black Focus Radio. We setting the facts straight today on jointedradio.com. Okay, so this is where the quick set helps, because now I don't have any stop sets loaded. If I would have been thinking ahead, I could have put some stop sets down here. Okay, but I wasn't, but that's cool, because I can just go here and just pull up a stop set. I know that I played stop set 2 last time. I'm just going to go ahead and play 4 this time. So again, I can't drag it down here. I got to play it from the quick set menu. As soon as I hit it, it plays. Okay? So I got 2 minutes and 57 seconds. All right? What's up, Django? I had to go in it today. I had to go on some of them today. I had enough. I don't do this often, but every now and then I have to expose the lies of black folks who are carrying Republican water, because theoretically and historically it makes no sense. None whatsoever.
Our law offices are centrally located at 212 Center Street in Little Rock.
So, just to talk a little bit about delivery. Content obviously is important. Okay? It's real important. Okay? But how do you deliver it is also important. So if you notice what I did, I actually used black facts to start the show to buttress my entire argument throughout for 2 hours. That was by design. Okay? So what I do is the night before or before the show, I decide, I have an idea of what I'm going to talk about, and every now and then stuff will pop up that I need to move up the agenda, like this thing with Iverson Jackson. But it fed right into what I talk about every day, is reparations and black ignorance and knowing history. So his lack of knowledge related to history fed right into the show that I was going to do today. You see how that works? So you have to be, in other words, you have to be a great analyzer. Okay? You got to be able to look at stuff, read stuff, and not just read it on its surface, but be able to interpret it and read between the lines. Does that make sense? All right, so I always got to pay attention to where my spots are. I got 37 seconds. Again, I'm talking to you, but I'm also paying attention to what's going on in there. Okay, so see, this is a promo. I know now that's a promo. I got 30 seconds. Okay, so every stop set we're going to have eventually will end in a promo. Okay, so I got to go back up to my quick, go to Daddamic Dave. I'm looking for my bed, Black Focus bed. Boom. So I come back with the music, with the bed, okay? All right, welcome back to the show. Dave Coleman in the house. I appreciate everybody who's indulging us on Facebook and YouTube. Those people that you see, you can kind of see Clayton on the YouTube feed. Jemiah is kind of sitting to my right. She's kind of hiding, but she'll stick her face in here in a moment. There she is. I have two potential seniors in high school. One at McClellan and the other one from Parkview. I know they're not Central grads. I take pity on other schools every now and then. Hey, man, he don't give us no slack on these schools. But they are here. They're going to be for the next 6 weeks, 5 weeks now. Learning radio. So I'm giving them, I'm just not giving them a cursory glance of the radio business. I am dumping them into the deep end. So by the end of the week, they're going to be running the boards. They're going to get to do everything that a radio producer does. In other words, most talk show hosts are no good without their producers. Okay? So what I do, where I'm finding my data and stuff like that, typically that's what you all do. Okay? So at the beginning of the show, they'll sit down and typically they'll have a meeting of what they're going to talk about. It's usually an hour, 2 hours before the show airs. They find all the information and data on that particular subject, and they decide what they're going to use as evidence to support their facts. Okay? I do that the night before because I don't have a producer. Okay? All right. So we were talking about, at large, black people supporting the Republican Party and why it's an anathema to anything. It is. Now you're certainly in this country, you're certainly able to have your own thought processes. You're certainly capable of doing anything you need as it relates to understanding and being who you are. You know, it's what I usually say about the First Amendment. You do have a right to say anything you want in the First Amendment. As a matter of fact, the Supreme Court just ruled that you could say F you to the police department, and that's under your First Amendment rights. It can tick them off, but if they arrest you, if they hit you, then they can be brought up for libel and violating your constitutional rights. So, but I tell people that when you say things under the First Amendment, that doesn't mean that you're ready for the consequences. So, yeah, you have a First Amendment right, but be prepared for the consequences that may ensue with whatever you say. So if you say dumb stuff, then particularly in this day and time where social media is out there, you're going to get fact checked. And particularly if you call yourself a leader of people, every day, I tell y'all how I prep. Every day I look at stories and then I fact check those stories. Even if it's from one of the local medias, even if it's from MSNBC or CNN, and I certainly fact check everything that Fox puts out. Let me say that again. I fact check everything Fox puts out. Every now and then they will put out something real. That's what I do. So I don't mind you fact checking me. Quite often, if I make a mistake on this show, I make that mistake out of misspeak, not out of speaking as I know what I'm talking about, because I try not to create the air that I know what I'm talking about unless I've actually read the story or unless I've actually done the research. That's important for me. So when I talk about history, a lot of times you see me reading, but I'd say 80% of the time, a lot of this stuff is coming off the top of my head. And it's coming off the top of my head because I've actually researched it and I've remembered it. I don't quite have a photogenic memory, but I used to tell people I have an elephant mind. You know, they say elephants never forget. I'm one of those people. I'm one of those people that if you actually did something to me in high school or junior high school, I still remember it. I do. I'm just saying, that's just how I am. My mind is wrapped that way. I never forget. Now, as I get older, I might start forgetting because I'm getting dementia. But if I'm in my sane mind, I rarely forget. I'm one of those people who can tell you or remembers every woman that I've dated, every woman that I've slept with. That's just how my mind is. I'm just strange like that. So we're talking about history. We're talking about culture. We're talking about black leadership. We're talking about why black leaders still persist to lead black people down a path to hell, although they espouse Jesus Christ. I'm confused. I don't know. That's why I'm asking the question, because I don't know. I don't know why. And here's the other thing. I don't really quite understand why black folks continue to allow it to happen. All you got to do is do like me. Pick up. Right now, look, a lot of the stuff that I learned, and I've told you all this, I had to go to the library or I had to purchase books. In fact, I went to my storage, and one of the books, you know, I've talked to you all about black hockey. Oh man, I forgot over the weekend, my favorite hockey player, PK Subban, has been traded from my favorite team, the Nashville Predators. He is now a New Jersey Devil. But remember, I told you all about black people playing hockey, and some of you all probably looked at the radio or your computer incredulously and said, wow, that's some crazy stuff. That boy done really lost it. And then, of course, I went to storage last week, and right on top of my books was a book about black people in hockey that dated back to 1827. That black people, in fact, had really created the game of hockey. I fact-checked myself. I don't mind you fact-checking me. And as I said earlier, that if you cannot fact-check your minister, then he should not be your minister. I'm just being real with you. If that person calls himself or herself a person of God, you can read the Bible, interpret it just like they can. Have you ever asked your minister, where did these people come from? Have you ever asked your minister what and where is Cush? Have you ever asked your minister where and what was Mesopotamia? And how did it relate to the Bible? If you cannot fact check your minister, then he doesn't need to be your minister. And I'm not saying fact check him to try to make him look bad. I'm not talking about Iverson Jackson today to try to make him look bad. I'm trying to give him education. Because if you're going to carry the Republican water, you have a unique opportunity as a black minister who is carrying Republican water to at least Educate them. Because if you believe, I know some black Republicans believe that the only way to change the Republican Party is from the inside out, then that's fine. I can understand that logic. But that's kind of like saying black people infiltrating the KKK. We can only change the KKK because we can join the KKK. Well, wait a minute. What was the philosophy of them? 855-525-5683 is the number. You're listening to Black Focus Radio. I believe we have a caller here. Caller, you're on Black Focus Radio. What's your name and what's on your mind? You there? Now, one of the things I need to tell you all that if you're going to pull up that call, I need to make sure that I mute that if it's up. I guess the caller wasn't for the show. So, Reverend Jackson, I hope you've learned something today. I hope you will take your bully pulpit to the Republican Party and make a correction. I hope you'll take every opportunity that you can to educate the Republican Party. Because after all, I don't know of any Jesus that would be killing babies. Hello? I don't know of any Jesus that would be denying health care to people. Because remember the man that was paralyzed, didn't Jesus give him free health care? The woman with the issue of blood, didn't Jesus give her free health care? Hello? When Jesus was on the water with his disciples and the storm, and they thought they were going to drown, didn't Jesus reach out and say, "Peace, be still," and help them? Hello? So how are you a Jesus person and you're not doing that as a party, and you want to espouse the word of God for the people of God? Jesus never called a poor person a welfare queen. In fact, I don't know that Jesus ever hung anyone. So how's it that you have Republicans saying that gay people ought to be killed? After all, aren't those God's creations? Some of you all treat your dogs better than you treat black people and gay people. Some of you treat your dogs better than you're wanting treatment for those children at the border. In fact, I saw an article the other day where a black man was sentenced to, I want to say, 100 years for killing a police dog. The dog is not even human. But they sentenced him more for killing a police dog than they would have had he killed a police officer. Where have we gone where we don't treat people with respect? Where have we gone where we can look at another individual and just based simply on their skin color, determine that they're less than you? Where have we gone whereas that we can look at a person based on where they grew up, that they are less than you? This is the Republican Party. It's anathema to anything we hold dear as moral citizens of this great world. And anyone, especially a black person who is a Republican, is lost. Now, I know what some of you all like to argue is Democratic talking points. That's what you argue against. But as I told you all, I'm not a Democrat. I'm not a Democrat. I would argue that black folks should abandon the Democratic Party sans right now. With haste. Do it right now and become an independent voting bloc. They ought to be able to, they should have to come to every city. Democrats ought to be able to come to this city and they must talk to all of us. So must the Republicans. You want my vote? Then you have to tell me what you're going to do for me. Remember last week when I wrote the tease that Jeremiah Wright was right and Obama was wrong? Remember that piece? Go back to my wall and look at the article that was written. Jeremiah Wright was right. Obama abandoned Jeremiah Wright because he wanted to be president of a white country. And he could not be president if he didn't turn his backs on black people. And while he was president, he did nothing specifically for black people. He was a Democrat. The Democrat that refused to prosecute the police officer that murdered Bradley Blackshire was a Democrat. Hello? The head Democrat right now running for president, Joe Biden, last week said he missed the days of talking to segregationists. Huh? He's a Democrat. So before all of you Republicans get your panties in a wad, oh, he just dogging Republicans. I dog Democrats too. They get mad at me too. We need more than a two-party system. Everybody in America is not Democrat or Republican. We need more than a two-party system. But guess what happens? The Democrats and the Republicans have rigged the system whereas that a third-party candidate can't even run and get funding, so that you must be Democrat or you must be Republican. Hello? So why are you a Democrat or a Republican? As a black man, they don't give a damn about you either way. The Democrats say, hey, vote for us. We might do something for you. And the Republicans say, we don't give a damn if you vote for us or not. We still hate black folks. One other point before I end the show today. President Trump is a pathological liar. We know that to be true. We know that to be true. President Trump is a pathological liar. If you are a minister who stands on truth, how could you be carrying the water for someone who lies literally every time he opens his mouth? I'm just asking the question. How can you support a president who has been documented to have told over 10,000 lies? And not little bitty lies, but lies that are obviously provable. And and when he's presented with the facts, he still lies. If you tell me that you are a minister, someone who is practicing truth, then I want to know how you're following someone like that. And more importantly, how you're leading other people. Because, see, your sin becomes worse if you sin That's one thing. But then if you lead other people to that sin, that makes your original sin worse. Think about that. It's kind of like it's kind of like Jim Jones. Y'all remember Jim Jones, the guy who made all those people drink the Kool-Aid, over 500 people drinking the Kool-Aid, and ended up it was arsenic and they died. Y'all remember that? Jim Jones' original sin was to lead those people to hell, but then he made his sin worse because he killed them all. So for you black ministers out there who are leading your people to the Republican Party, you're leading them to hell. And that makes your sin even worse. Think about that. And by the way, Reverend Iverson Jackson, if you'd love to come on the show, you probably won't. But if you'd like to come on the show and debate this, I'd love to hear from you. 855-525-5683. Here's my cell, 615-554-0568. You're still my friend. You're still my ex-teammate. And you're still wrong. We got to get out of here. Y'all have a great day. You're listening to Black Focus Radio. I'm Dynamic Dave on joynetradio.com. Kill the mic. Okay. Now, we don't want to, we can go, we got 28 seconds to go, but instead of that, we want to go straight to the close. Click close.
You've been listening to Black Focus, where we discuss our issues with our solutions.
Now, what I've done, I went ahead and loaded a stop set in here while we were talking.
On joynetradio.com.
So I'm going to let that play while I turn off all of our stuff.